The Virillians discovered the artifact during their golden age of exploration. Their colony ships had just reached the outer arms of the galaxy when a mining vessel stumbled upon something impossible, a perfectly symmetrical object floating in the void between stars. It wasn't attached to any planetary system, had no apparent propulsion, and emanated energy patterns unlike anything their sensors had ever recorded. Engineer Donghe was the first to touch it. As the chief scientist aboard the mining vessel, he claimed the right despite the captain's protests. Nothing happened when his scaled fingers brushed against its smooth surface. The complete lack of reaction disappointed the crew, who had expected either enlightenment or destruction. It feels warm, Donghe noted, almost alive. They brought it back to their homeworld with great care. The Empire's best minds gathered to study it. The object, roughly the size of a small transport vehicle, was made of material that defied their most sophisticated analysis. It absorbed all scanning attempts and reflected nothing. Yet somehow, it hummed with potential. 200 years passed. The artifact remained silent. Research teams came and went. Theories spread, each more elaborate than the last. Some believed it was a weapon, others a repository of knowledge. Religious factions emerged, claiming it was a test from creator beings. Jinky, the first to suggest it might be a doorway to other dimensions, led research for nearly 50 years. His team developed new mathematics trying to decode the patterns barely visible on its surface. On his deathbed, he confessed his failure. "We are missing something fundamental," he told his protégé Subin. "Something so basic we cannot see it." By the 500th year of study, the artifact had become central to Virillian culture. Children learned about it in their earliest education. Artists depicted it in grand murals. Politicians used it as a metaphor for perseverance. The Virillian calendar was reset to mark year 0 as the day of its discovery. Researcher Yunha made the first breakthrough in year 947. She noticed that the artifact responded slightly to certain sound frequencies. The changes were microscopic patterns shifting at molecular levels, but it was the first confirmed reaction. For a decade, Virillians tried every possible sound combination. The artifact stirred but never awakened. "We're speaking to it," Yunha announced before the Grand Council, "but we don't yet know its language." By year 1500, the original research facility had evolved into a city. The brightest minds from across the empire lived there, devoting generations to the puzzle. They named it Myeonsim Bright Heart for the faint glow it sometimes emitted during their tests. In year 2043, engineer Minji discovered that the artifact changed temperature depending on which side faced the sun. This led to thermal testing that consumed another century. They learned that the object could absorb unlimited heat without damage but never revealed its secrets. 3,000 years after its discovery, Emperor Juno dedicated a quarter of the Empire's scientific resources to the artifact. "Our civilization will be defined by whether we solve this riddle," he declared. New theories emerged daily. Careers rose and fell based on promising research paths that ultimately led nowhere. In year 4302, the Virillians achieved faster-than-light travel. They expanded across 12 star systems. Still, the artifact remained their greatest mystery. Some argued they should move beyond their obsession. Others insisted it was the key to even greater advancement. Chief Engineer Taeho became the artifact's caretaker in year 4995. After brilliant successes in quantum field theory, he requested the assignment that many now considered a career-ending post. He approached the problem methodically, reviewing 5 millennia of research before beginning his own tests. "We've been thinking about this wrong," he told his team on his first day. "We've been trying to conquer the artifact with knowledge. Perhaps we should try to understand it instead." On the morning when the human delegation was scheduled to tour the facility, Taeho stood before the artifact feeling the familiar mixture of reverence and frustration. His assistant Jaiwoo worked quietly nearby, preparing data for their visitors. "Another day, another failure," Taeho muttered. Jaiwoo looked up from her station. "The Grand Council is asking for updates again. Should I tell them we're making progress?" Taeho sighed, passing a hand over his face. "Tell them the truth. After 5,000 years, we're no closer than when we found it. Neither of them could have imagined that within hours, everything they thought they knew about the artifact and their place in the universe would change forever. The human ship arrived at the Virillian home system after months of travel through the void. Named Horizon, it carried Earth's first diplomatic mission to the alien civilization. The crew consisted of 30 specialists, carefully selected for their expertise and temperament. Among them was engineer Hyunjin, who had earned her place not through political connections but through her uncanny ability to solve problems others found impossible. Approaching Virillian space station, announced the pilot. Prepare for docking procedures. Hyunjin pressed her face against the viewport, taking in the stunning structure. The Virillian station curved like a giant silver flower, its petals extending outward to capture sunlight. It dwarfed their ship, making the Horizon look like a toy by comparison. Remember, said Ambassador Lee, addressing the crew, we are guests here. The Virillians have existed as a spacefaring civilization for nearly 10,000 years. They see us as children. The docking went smoothly. When the airlock opened, Hyunjin got her first glimpse of a Virillian. Ambassador Miho stood tall, his scaled skin shimmering with blue-green iridescence. His four eyes blinked in alternating pairs as he bowed deeply. Welcome, he said, his translator converting his musical language into English. We are honored by your presence. The humans filed out of their ship, blinking under the bright lights of the docking bay. Hyunjin hung back, observing everything with quiet fascination. The air smelled clean but strange, with hints of something like cinnamon. We have prepared a tour of our facilities, Miho explained. Then we will discuss potential areas of cooperation between our peoples. The next day unfolded in a blur of technological wonders. The Virillians showed off their matter replicators, gravity manipulators, and biological engineering labs. At each stop, they patiently explained concepts that made Earth's most advanced science seem primitive. Engineer Taeho joined them midway through the tour. He moved with a graceful efficiency that caught Hyunjin's attention. Unlike the other Virillians, who sometimes seemed condescending, Taeho showed genuine interest in human perspectives. Your species adapts quickly, he told Hyunjin as they walked between exhibits. We've studied your history. From simple flight to space travel in less than a century, impressive. We have a lot to learn from you, Hyunjin replied. Taeho made a gesture that his translator interpreted as thoughtful agreement. Perhaps. But different perspectives have value. Sometimes progress comes from unexpected directions. As they entered the quantum transportation hub, Hyunjin noticed a familiar shape on several display screens, a strange, symmetrical object that appeared in diagrams throughout the facility. It wasn't the focus of the presentations, but it appeared frequently in the background. What's that? She asked, pointing to one of the images. The room fell silent. Taeho and Miho exchanged glances. That, Miho said finally, is a reminder of our limitations. It's called the unsolvable puzzle, added Taeho. An artifact we discovered 5,000 years ago. We still don't understand its purpose or how to activate it. Hyunjin's curiosity sparked. You've been studying it for 5,000 years? Our best minds have dedicated their lives to it, Miho said. We've tried everything. It remains silent. Hyunjin couldn't help herself. May I see it? Again, the Virillians exchanged looks. Several made sounds that the translators didn't convert. If you wish, Miho said eventually. Though I warn you, it has humbled greater minds than any in this room. Ambassador Lee shot Hyunjin a warning glance, but she pretended not to notice. The next morning, Taeho personally escorted Hyunjin to the artifact chamber. They traveled by gravity tube to a massive complex built around a central dome. Security was tight, with multiple checkpoints along the way. The artifact is central to our culture, Taeho explained as they walked. Some view it as sacred. Others see it as a challenge that defines us. All agree it's the greatest mystery we've ever encountered. The doors to the chamber slid open, revealing a room larger than Hyunjin expected. In the center, floating a few inches above a platform, was the artifact. It seemed to absorb the light around it while simultaneously emitting a faint glow. "It's beautiful," Hyunjin whispered. "Yes," Taeho agreed. "And maddening." As they approached, Hyunjin noticed other Virillians working at stations around the room. They looked up briefly, their expressions showing a mixture of curiosity and skepticism at the human visitor. "May I walk around it?" Hyunjin asked. "Of course," said Taeho. "Though we've mapped every molecule of its surface. There are no hidden buttons or switches, if that's what you're looking for." Hyunjin circled the object slowly, her trained engineer's eye taking in details. Something about it seemed familiar, though she couldn't place why. She felt drawn to it in a way she couldn't explain. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked Taeho, not taking her eyes off the artifact. "Tomorrow you rejoin your delegation," he said. "But if you're interested, I can arrange for you to observe our research team's work." Hyunjin nodded. "I'd like that very much." Neither of them knew that tomorrow would change everything. Morning came quickly on the Virillian homeworld. Hyunjin found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts filled with images of the artifact. She arrived at the research facility an hour early, surprised to find Taeho already waiting. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Taeho's scales shifted color slightly. "I rarely sleep well. The artifact calls to me, even in dreams." They entered the chamber together. The morning research team was setting up equipment for another day of tests. Jaiwo approached them with data tablets, handing one to Taeho. "Today we're testing gravitational resonance patterns," Jaiwo explained. "The theory is that the artifact might respond to specific wave frequencies." Hyunjin listened as Taeho outlined the day's experiments. The Virillians had a methodical approach, testing every possible variable with precise instruments. Their technology was impressive, but something about their process bothered her. "May I ask a question?" Hyunjin interrupted. Taeho nodded. "Have you ever tried just interacting with it directly? Not with machines, but with your hands?" Several Virillians made the sound Hyunjin now recognized as laughter. "Of course," one scientist said. "That was the first thing we tried. 5,000 years ago. We've tried every computational model, every known language pattern," Taeho explained patiently. "We've subjected it to radiation, sound waves, gravitational. Has anyone tried touching it while thinking about what it might be for?" Hyunjin interrupted. "Not analyzing it, but treating it like a tool meant to be used?" The room fell silent. Taeho tilted his head, a gesture Hyunjin had learned indicated confusion. "I don't understand," Taeho said. Hyunjin walked closer to the artifact. "Look at these markings. These indentations. They seem like they're meant for hands." "We've measured those precisely," Jaiwo said. "They don't match Virillian anatomy." "No," Hyunjin agreed. "They don't. But they might match something else." She studied the artifact's surface. The smooth material featured several shallow depressions, arranged in patterns that reminded her of old Earth tools, designed for intuitive use. "What are you thinking?" Taeho asked, moving closer. "I'm thinking," Hyunjin said slowly, "that whoever made this designed it to be simple. What if all your advanced analysis is overlooking the obvious? What if it's meant to be used, not studied?" The Virillians exchanged glances. Some made dismissive gestures, but Taeho seemed intrigued. "What do you propose?" he asked. "I'd like to try touching it," Hyunjin said. "Not to analyze it, but to use it." More laughter rippled through the room. One older Virillian stepped forward, his scales a deep purple with age. "Young human, do you believe you can solve in minutes what our civilization has failed to understand for millennia?" Hyunjin shook her head. "No. But sometimes a fresh perspective helps. Sometimes we overthink problems." The old Virillian seemed ready to object further, but Taeho raised a hand. "Let her try," he said. "We have nothing to lose." Hyunjin approached the artifact slowly. The room fell silent as she studied the depressions. They were arranged in pairs, roughly the size of human hands. She placed her palms against the cool surface, feeling a slight vibration. "These grooves," she murmured. "They're hand-sized. And these ridges seem like they're meant to guide a turning motion." Taeho watched intently. "What are you doing?" "I'm treating it like it was made for someone to use," Hyunjin explained. "Not as a puzzle, but as a tool." She positioned her hands in the depressions and felt something click into place. A perfect fit. The surface beneath her palms warmed slightly. "It's responding," she whispered. Following her instinct, Hyunjin gently rotated her hands, turning them outward as if opening a jar. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the artifact hummed to life. A soft blue light emerged from its core, expanding outward to fill the room with a gentle glow. The Virillians gasped collectively. Some backed away. Others moved closer. Taeho stood frozen, his four eyes widened in disbelief. The light coalesced into patterns above the artifact. Symbols appeared, floating in the air, shifting and changing. "It's working," Hyunjin said, keeping her hands in position. "It's actually working." "Impossible," whispered the old Virillian. 5,000 years. "What did you do?" Taeho asked, his voice barely audible. Hyunjin smiled. "Nothing special. I just approached it differently. You were looking for complexity because that's how your civilization thinks. But sometimes, the greatest inventions are the simplest to use." The symbols continued to shift and change. Taeho cautiously moved closer, studying them with growing excitement. "These patterns," he said. "They're forming a language structure. It's trying to communicate." Around the room, Virillian scientists rushed to their instruments, recording everything. Some still looked shocked. Others seemed almost reverent. Jaiwoo approached Hyunjin, her scales shifting to a color Hyunjin hadn't seen before. "Thank you," she said simply. Hyunjin nodded, keeping her hands steady as the artifact continued to reveal its secrets. After 5,000 years of silence, it had found someone who understood how to listen. The blue light from the artifact filled the chamber, casting everything in a soft glow. Symbols floated in the air, shifting and changing as Hyunjin maintained her grip on the device. The Virillian scientists scrambled to record every detail, their instruments running at full capacity. "It's a language," Taeho said, his voice filled with wonder. "But nothing like ours." Hyunjin nodded, concentrating on keeping her hands steady. "The patterns are repeating. I think it's trying to establish basic communication." Jaiwoo hurried to a console nearby. "I'm feeding this into our translation matrix. It might take time to." She stopped mid-sentence as the floating symbols suddenly rearranged themselves. They formed into shapes that resembled Virillian writing, then shifted again into something close to human English. "It's adapting to us," whispered an older scientist. "It's learning our languages." The symbols stabilized, forming words that everyone could read. "Greeting. Communication established. Identify species." The room fell silent. Taeho looked at Hyunjin, who nodded encouragingly. "We are Virillians," Taeho said clearly. "And this is a human from Earth. We welcome communication." The artifact pulsed once, and new words formed, recognized. Two species working together. Requirement met. "Requirement?" Jaiwoo asked, looking confused. "What requirement?" The artifact's light intensified. "This tool was created by the Arcani. It is a universal translator and knowledge repository. Access requires cooperation between different thinking patterns." Hyunjin felt a tingling sensation in her palms. "Who are the Arcani?" "We existed 1 million years ago. Our civilization spanned this galaxy. We left tools for emerging species to find when ready." Taeho stepped closer. "We've been studying this artifact for 5,000 years. Why didn't it respond to us?" The answer appeared immediately: this tool was designed for simplicity. Your species evolved complex thinking. You sought complexity where none existed. Humans retain intuitive thinking patterns compatible with basic interface. Hyunjin couldn't help but smile. You're saying the Virillians were overthinking it? Correct. Advanced species often lose simple intuition. Tool requires both advanced knowledge and simple approach. Cooperation between different minds. The implications hit everyone at once. For 5 millennia, the Virillians had approached the artifact with their most sophisticated technology and complex theories. But what it needed was something they had evolved beyond simple, intuitive interaction. That's why it has hand-shaped indentations, Hyunjin realized. It was literally made to be handled, not analyzed. An older Virillian scientist sank into a chair, looking stunned. Our greatest minds, thousands of years, and the solution was so simple? How can this repository serve your species? The artifact asked. Taeho looked around at his fellow scientists, then back at Hyunjin. We would like to learn about the Archoni and their knowledge. Access granted. Caution advised. Information should be absorbed gradually. The floating symbols transformed into images, star maps, technological designs, biological systems. Information began flowing into the room's data systems. It's downloading into our network, Jaiwo said, checking her console. The amount of data is enormous. Hyunjin carefully maintained her position. How much longer do I need to hold this? Interface complete. Activation permanent. Manual contact no longer required. She slowly removed her hands, and the artifact continued to glow and project information. The Virillians watched in amazement as millennia of Archoni knowledge became available to them. This changes everything, Taeho said quietly. Our entire understanding of the universe. News spread quickly through the research facility. Within an hour, the chamber was filled with Virillian officials and scientists. Many stared at Hyunjin with a mixture of disbelief and respect. The Grand Council arrived, their formal robes sweeping the floor as they approached the now active artifact. Their leader, an ancient Virillian named Yunho, bowed deeply to Hyunjin. In 5,000 years, we never considered that the solution might be too simple for us to see, he said. We have built our civilization on complexity, on always seeking the most advanced solution. Hyunjin bowed in return. Different species think differently. That's not a weakness, it's a strength when we work together. Yunho nodded slowly. The artifact, no, the repository, was waiting not just for technological readiness, but for cooperation between different kinds of minds. The Archoni believed diversity of thought essential for galactic stability, the repository confirmed. No single approach sufficient for universal challenges. Later that evening, Hyunjin sat with Taeho in a quiet corner of the facility. Around them, Virillian scientists worked alongside human colleagues who had been called in from the diplomatic mission. How does it feel, Taeho asked, to have solved in minutes what stumped our civilization for 5,000 years? Hyunjin shook her head. I didn't solve it alone. I couldn't have understood what it was without your people's research. The repository is right, we needed each other. Taeho's scales shifted to a warm golden color. Perhaps that was the real test all along. 6 months passed since the activation of the Archoni repository. What began as a simple diplomatic visit had transformed into the greatest cooperative venture in known history. The Virillian capital now hosted a permanent human embassy, and teams from both species worked side by side daily. Hyunjin stood at the window of her new office, watching the twin suns set over the horizon. The view still took her breath away, purple skies streaked with gold, the silhouettes of floating cities in the distance. Behind her, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Ready for the ceremony? Taeho asked, entering the room. Hyunjin turned and smiled. In the past months, she had learned to read Virillian expressions well. Taeho's scales had turned the bright blue that indicated excitement. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied. I still don't understand why they want me to speak. I just put my hands on it. That's exactly why, Taeho said. You did what none of us could, you approached the unknown with simple clarity. They walked together through the halls of the newly built Cooperative Research Division. Virillians and humans worked at shared stations, their different sizes and shapes creating an unusual but effective workflow. Some humans stood on platforms to reach tall consoles, while Virillians used special tools designed for their four-fingered hands. The main auditorium was filled to capacity. Over 3,000 researchers from both species had gathered for the official opening ceremony. At the center of the stage stood the artifact, now called the First Repository, glowing softly with its constant blue light. Grand Counselor Yunho stepped to the podium first. His age showed in his deep purple scales, but his voice remained strong. For 5,000 years, this object represented our greatest failure, he began. Now it stands as our greatest opportunity. Not because we conquered it, but because we learned to see beyond ourselves. Applause filled the room. Yunho continued, "Today we inaugurate the Human Virillian Cooperative Research Division. Already we have discovered evidence of 16 more Archon-E repositories scattered throughout the galaxy. Some will require Virillian mathematical understanding. Others will need human intuition. All will require us to work together." When it was Hyunjin's turn to speak, she felt surprisingly calm. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified to address such a crowd. Now it felt like talking to friends. "When I first touched the repository," she said, "I wasn't trying to solve a 5,000-year-old puzzle. I was just curious. Sometimes the greatest discoveries happen when we stop trying so hard." She gestured to the scientists in the audience. The Archon-E left these gifts for all intelligent life, not just one species. They understood that different minds approach problems differently. The Virillians excel at complex analysis. Humans often see the simple patterns. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone. After the ceremony, a small group gathered in a garden overlooking the city. Hyunjin stood with Taeho, Jaiwoo, and several human colleagues, sharing drinks as the stars appeared overhead. "Did you see the new data from the third repository?" asked Jaiwoo. "It contains star maps from the far side of the galaxy. And transportation technology beyond anything we imagined," added Taeho. "With those systems, we could reach the Andromeda Galaxy within a human lifetime." Kiho, one of the human engineers, shook his head in wonder. 6 months ago, we were celebrating our first faster-than-light travel. Now we're talking about visiting other galaxies. "The repositories are changing us," Hyunjin said. "Both our species." It was true. Virillian culture, rigid and traditional for thousands of years, was embracing new ideas. Their art began featuring simpler designs alongside complex patterns. Their education system now taught children to approach problems from multiple perspectives. Human society was changing too. The knowledge from the repositories had accelerated technology development beyond imagination. More importantly, working with the Virillians had taught humans patience and long-term thinking. "I received word from Earth today," Kiho mentioned. "They've approved construction of the first joint colony ship. Virillian engineering with human design elements." "Where will it go?" asked Jaiwoo. "The Archon-E home system," Taeho replied. "We found its coordinates in the second repository." Hyunjin looked up at the stars, thinking about the journey ahead. "They've been gone for 1,000,000 years. I wonder if they left more than just knowledge behind." "Perhaps they're still out there somewhere," Taeho said. "Watching to see what we do with their gifts." As the night deepened, Hyunjin reflected on how much had changed because of one simple moment, her hands touching an ancient device while thinking differently about a problem. The artifact that had frustrated brilliant minds for 5 millennia had only needed someone to approach it with fresh eyes. "To new horizons," Taeho said, raising his glass in a human gesture he had learned. "And new understanding," Hyunjin added, completing the toast. Above them, the stars seemed brighter than before, each one possibly hiding another repository, another piece of the cosmic puzzle waiting to be solved by curious hands working together.